let me present our today's speaker. It's Yudkevich and Oleg Viktorovich Poldin. So the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. I should probably say thanks for invitation. So thank you everybody. That's again our joint work with Oleg Poldin and also with two our Brazilian colleagues, one of whom we have never met. So that's again a good illustration of new world. But we know Marcelo Knobel. And again, that's one more work about peer effects and one more work on social networks. So you may ask what might be new in peer effects after so many research and papers even done here at since on peer effects. So one simple answer is it's new because that's the first attempt to look on two countries. Why comparison might be important? Because two countries mean two educational systems, and two educational system means two totally different learning environment. So normally all papers on peer effects consider very specific peer environments and get very specific results. So that's the first attempt to look on two different sets of data in one paper, namely Brazil, represented by University of Campinas, and Russia, represented by, again, High School of Economics. There is something new more on this paper, but I'm going to talk about that a bit later. Again, some basic facts on the peer effects and what we know about peer effects in education. First, we all know that there are a lot of factors which influence students' academic achievements, both as students some years ago and as teachers. Now we know that there are a lot of factors which affect students' achievements. This might be personal ability, which means if students is bright or not that bright, might affect their achievements. Also, if students is lazy or hardworking, that is, learning effort might be important as well. Family resources, whether your grandma prepare your breakfast and wake you up in the morning and said, okay, guy, you should go to school, or nobody cares about what you're doing home, whether you do homework, etc. Also, some people claim that teachers are important, and there are even some data which support this claim that good teacher help people to get better students' achievements, and poor teaching might influence your achievements in their not very good way. And also what is important, and many recent research discuss that, are peers, which means your social environment, your learning environment might be important for your personal grades. So the question is, there might be some positive or versus negative effects from the concentration of high quality or low quality students in your group. If you are put in the middle of lazy people, you probably will be lazy as well. And if you are in the competitive environment where everybody is hardworking, you might also be hardworking as well, probably. So which means that there are a lot of anecdotal evidence on many countries and many learning environments that being placed in the strong environment, students can improve their individual academic outcomes. And vice versa, in weaker environments, students give up and get lower grades. So our peer group effects might be also important, not from the microeconomic point of view, but from the point of view of policy questions. And there are a lot of policy questions related to peer effects, and one of them is, let's imagine, for example, there is a huge increase in demand for higher education. And this increase in demand we can see in many countries. For example, in big countries, a number of students, young people who want to go for higher education is growing from year to year. So there is a huge increase in interest toward higher education. So there might be two options for at least high quality sector. It might be either to expand access to high quality programs and universities. For example, government can give more money to universities to take more students. and to provide them with high quality teaching. Or another option might be to increase selectivity at the admission level and take the same number of students but very high quality students. So why peer effects might be important in asking the question what's the better for the government, for example, is that students may benefit from interaction with able students. If that is the case, some small elite programs might be important to keep. And if we expand this program and if we discrete a little bit the selectivity of this program, I know why you're smiling, because that's, for example, the case of joint HEC and New Economic School program, where the question is, there's a really huge demand for this program, which is probably twice bigger than the number of places. So the question is, shall we follow this demand to increase the number of places, or we should improve the selectivity and just take only like half of those students who want to go there? That's an open question. So if there is some positive peer effect, the answer might be not to increase the number of students, but increase the selectivity. How peer effects can work? So a lot of channels, a lot of mechanisms through which peer effects might work. We can learn from peers. We can also cooperate with peers when making our efforts to prepare homeworks, etc. Also, if you are in the strong group, the teacher might be able to give more material to students. Because if all students are not very quick in understanding what the teacher says he or she can spend more time in explaining materials. So a strong group can move more quickly. And composition of the group is also important because teacher can make different efforts toward different group of students. So if you're students in the strong group or in a weak group, that's influences teacher's decision to work with you individually. What might be also important is the level of competitiveness of the environment. That's a tricky question whether the competitive environment is good or bad, and there is no unique answer, because if you are strong students, probably competitive environment is good because you might feel competitive as well and you have good chances to be on the top of ranking. But if you are a weak student, you might consider the competitive environment counterproductive because you are anyway in the bottom of ranking and there is no incentives for you to improve because there is no hope to improve significantly. Peers' habit like drinking beer or some other nicer routines might be also important and influence your achievements. And social norms may be important as well, because if in the group everybody believes that only stupid people spend a lot of time on the homework, it influences negatively students' achievements. So that's so there are a lot of channels and there are a lot to explore, but the main problem is that it's really hard to estimate peer effects empirically. Why is there a problem with the empirical estimation? Because why it's not easy to measure? There are at least two important problems. First is it's not very trivial to define correctly the right peer group. What is a peer group? Is this just the whole class, or like corner of the class where you are sitting, or people of the same gender, or people of the same appearance, or people of the same achievements, or people of the same social capital? A lot of candidates. So it's really hard to determine what is the right peer group. Or people with nice names, like Knobel names. That might be also the case. Another problem is that normally peer group, an important peer group, is associated with some type of social interactions because if there are more social interaction between you and other people, it means that probably those people are more important for you in the social learning, in the academic learning, which means that social norms and social ties are always an important ingredient there, which means that creates a second problem, which is the endogeneity of social interactions. Because friends are those people we are deliberately choosing, that's why there is always endogeneity there. And we need to know how to control for that, and that's not an easy task. So what the literature says about that? There are a lot of recent papers on peer effects, and many of them try to use existing institutional rules which assume random assignment of peers. Because if there is a random assignment of peers, it means there is no endogeneity problem, or this problem is not that important. That's why most of the papers which try to address this issue normally looks on their very specific educational program. It normally looks on the aids on roommates. We frequently discuss this issue because roommates in, for example, US universities, the first years, they are normally determined by the lottery, which is kind of exogenous mechanism to define with whom you will stay for the whole year. So that's a good mechanism to define peers. And the evidence is mixed. There are both papers which says that there is some significant influence on the peers, and also some papers which says that there is no important significant influence on the peer groups defined as roommates. Roommates are both a good and bad group to use, because from one hand you spend like half of their 24 hours per day with this person, but the problem is that normally you are sleeping at that time, so in the active part of the day you are normally somewhere else, and also your roommate might be from the different major. If you study humanities and your roommates study mathematics, probably there is not so much peer influence. Yeah, of course. Okay, so another option is to look on the classroom in the case when classmates are also exogenously defined. This might happen in two cases. First, it quite often happens in the military institutions, because military discipline doesn't assume any choice for the students. You are assigned to the group and you spend with the group several consequent years. And there is also some countries, happily Russia is one of them, where there is not much choice for undergraduate students in terms of courses. And this allows us to look on the Russian data, because in Russian case you normally assigned in the group exogenously by administration, and you don't choose your classmates in this sense. So there are papers in Russian. There is also paper in India which exploits the same nice institutional rule. There's also a number of papers which look on the peer effects on student social networks, looking in different countries. Why is that? Because students interact with some students more than with other students. So we might look on the special social groups, smaller than classes, and to see whether there is some significant influence from these groups. And again, in most cases, the authors were able to find some significant influence from such peer groups. Again, if we define peer groups through some types of social networks, that's a very attractive idea. But the problem here is that social ties are clearly endogenous. And in most cases, this information is not very easy to retrieve. So we should approach people and ask them directly about the networks, or we should sit and watch how people interact with each other for their, say, some period. So how we address this problem? We say if in some cases we don't know what actual networks are. And if you don't know what real ties are, let's try to predict what these ties may be. What basis we can use for prediction? We might remember there is such a rule as a homophily rule, which means that quite often people form ties on the basis of some common characteristics. And let's try to use this principle to predict tie and to see whether these predicted ties influence actual academic achievements. So what we say, okay, let's look on the regularities, information of social networks, and one of the most important regularity is this principle of homophily. So again, what's the motivation for our study is that there is mixed evidence from institution to institution, and we want to look on two institutions at the same time. So social networks are very good in terms of theoretical explanation why people might influence each other, but since we don't know in many cases actual social networks, let's try to predict them. And we estimate peer effects on student academic achievement from these predicted trends. So we take 2 countries and 2 institutions. Why we take HEC and Campinas? Because both institutions play very similar role in the respective countries. Both institutions are trying to be research intensive. Both institutions are very ambitious, and both institutions are in the top of rankings in their respective countries. Some fact, we all know how the higher education is organized in Russia, so a few words about Brazilian higher education. In Brazil, there is a quite small, about the quarter in terms of enrollment, number of public universities. So there is a huge private sector, and this private sector, again, as in Russia, is associated with low quality education. Also, public universities are very competitive, and it's very hard to get there. And if you get into the public university, you don't pay any tuition, you don't pay for anything. That creates some problems for public universities as well, but students are very happy if they get enrolled in the public universities. So there's a huge application for applications for each public place in the public university, so only about 10% of applicants on average get accepted. University of Campinas is located in the state of São Paulo. That's a large public state university, and it's ranked 2nd in Latin America. In QS ranking, in other rankings, it's also placed quite high. And it's also, since it's a new university and it's again as HEC is under 50, it's also ranking the ranking of 50 universities under 50. Sorry, he on the fourth, in the 40 something. Again, HEC is about is on the place like 80 something, which is lower. So we take 2 very selective programs, which are econ and mechanical engineering. And for both programs, there is a huge number of applications. That's very selective programs. So how the studying at Unicamp is organized? Again, that's look very similar on what we have in HEC. In mechanical engineering, both in the econ and mechanical engineering, students have large classes all together, like lectures, and they also have tutorials and small classes in the smaller stable groups. The only difference between mechanical engineering and economics is that weekly workload is much higher in mechanical engineering case and lower in case of econ. So majority of students come from different cities, from different part of the country. And normally, they stay in big apartments and they share these apartments together. And these apartments are very close to the campus. Actually, since the university is outside the city, so it's kind of city itself. So that's a campus with apartments around them. So students spend a lot of time either on the campus or very close to it, and spend a lot of time on their extracurricular group activities. And there is also level of minimum attendance which is required for successful graduation from courses, which is 75%, which means that students really spend a lot of time altogether during the course of study. Studying at HEC, in the case somebody forgot how it looks like, we also have a competitive system, and we are also quite selective, again as is Unicamp. And we also have our larger classes for lectures and small stable groups for seminars, again as in Unicamp. And our weekly load is also something between 20 and 25. That's what our report says from the institutional monitoring of students' life, which is exactly the same week load as our econ program at Unicamp. So,
what do you know about dropouts at Unicamp?
That's a good issue, and I can't give you the exact numbers, but that's I think close to 15% from the first year, 15 to 20% of the first year, from at least for electrical engineering. So there is some dropout, but it's not like in France when you have half of people going out of that. So at this place, I'll give a floor to my co-author.
May I ask you a
Yep.
question?
Yep.
I have a question about scholarships in Unicamp, because we know how it works in Russia, and what about scholarships in Brazil? Because if they rent a house together, it costs a lot of money.
The idea is that every student who get admitted to this public university gets a stipend. If he needs a stipend, he gets a stipend to study, and also for living, and he or she doesn't pay for education. And also there is very big subsidies for meals and everything. And all institutions like hospital, restaurants and everything on campus can't be for profit, so they can't take extra money for students. So the idea is that money is not an issue in terms of access to education. So that's close to HEC philosophy if you speak about public places. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Maria Markovna. All the data we used in our study were obtained from official university administration. There's some computer systems that may be used to approach the data. As for Unicamp students, we were given data about 2 bachelor programs. Students who were admitted to mechanical engineering program and economics in 3 consecutive years from 2009 to 2011. In our study, we used the most recent data available to us at the period of empirical research that we conducted in 2014. The latest data available about students admitted in 2013. We used data about students who studied in the first year in 5 greatest in size bachelor programs: program management, law, economics, international economics and policy, and business informatics. These programs are the largest one as for enrollment figures, and they have a mixed proportion of students who study at publicly funded places and commercial places also available for these students. So these programs are rather diverse. As dependent variable, we used achievement in the first year of study. Commonly used measures here are grades in particular subjects, or just grade point average, just average overall, or selected grades over several subjects. As for Unicamp data, the situation is the following. Students can choose the subject, and there is a core program, but the number of such courses is not very big, so overlapping of courses is not very high. So we decided naturally to use as dependent variable the subject grades. So the number of observations is the number of students attended particular courses. So actually we multiply the number of students by the number of courses attended, average. So here the outcome variable is course grade. The maximum grade is, as like in high school of economics, is 10. The minimum grade is 5, below is not satisfactory. At high school of economics, as you know, most courses are compulsory, at least in the first year of study. And therefore we used grade point average, which is calculated as a simple arithmetic mean over all courses, maybe except some courses like physical culture, because it's usually all students get higher grades without any distinctions between actual physical fit of students.
I'm sorry, can you repeat once again, what was the measure of grade in Unicamp? Could you repeat once again what was the measure of course grades for the students in Unicamp?
Measure of grades?
Dependent variable for the Unicamp. How did you measure the average grade for the students?
No, we didn't measure average grade. We just took grades in particular subjects. For each subject, we have data. For example, as for economics, some kind of introductory economics grades for each student who attended this course. We use as an output measure for this group of students. Students who didn't attend this course, of course, they are not in the sample for this subject. But other students attended another course, and we have grades for such course. So we have in the sample the same student may enter this sample several times, but grades refer to different subjects. As for HSC, each student is a single item in the sample, and the output is average grade. In Unicamp, student and grade in particular subjects, several subjects grades. So as we will see later, the sample size for Unicamp is much higher for high school of economics, just because we have multiple entries for a single student.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you maybe repeat, please, why didn't you decide to take just the grade GPA for guys at Unicamp? Because
for Unicamp, courses are chosen freely by students.
all courses?
Yes. No, except there are some recommendations, but a lot of, as we call, facultatives or optional courses.
There's a number of core courses and everybody takes them as a small one.
Yes.
And also specific courses.
Okay.
It's kind of a United States system where students, it's not very like the American system where subjects are very, very diverse, but nevertheless it's something in between American system and Russian system where freedom of choice at the first year of study is not high, and absolute, maybe close to absolute freedom of choice of different minors, major courses, and from different departments. So that's why we just, because otherwise we will have non-comparable grades if we just average overall subjects attended, because some students may choose simple courses, others may choose more difficult, and this may create situation uncomparable as for achievement within the sample.
I have another very small question about HEC grades. Did you take into consideration the coefficient of difficulty of the subject, or you?
No. It's not weighted. It's not rating, as we call it. It's a difficulty, but maybe the size of workload, because just simple arithmetic. But the difference between the level of correlation between simple arithmetic mean and the weighted mean is very high. It's very close to 1. So weighting is actually doesn't mean it's kind of 95%. I think correlation between rating and simple arithmetic mean. Independent variables as a level of ability, as ability measure or level of preparedness. We used admission test scores. As for Russian case, this is a unified state examination or Olympiad winners who didn't provide all United States examination scores on all subjects. We just assign them the maximum possible USC scores. As for average, it's 100. So we just put Olympiad winners the highest possible 100 average USE score. The next variable, gender, and as for peer variables, peer background characteristics, as we measure ability and level of preparedness. Of course, it's the just simple mean admission test scores. As for Unicamp, students who applied to Unicamp, they took admission exams, just like in Russia before Unified States examination. It's universal for all the students who apply to this university. So the results are also comparable across the sample for each year, of course, year of admission, and for students who apply to each particular program. As for peer group definition, as Maria Markovna told us, we define peer groups as a group consisted of those students who are likely, or most probably, would form a friendship ties. As a hypothesis to predict friendship ties, we use a hypothesis of homophily, or it is in economic literature it's called assertivity hypothesis, which supposes that students who share the same attributes, personal attributes, or people who meet each other often or just located geographically close, or just meet each other in lecture room, they have more chances to form social ties than students who differ in their characteristic and meet rarely and located geographically at longer distances. The basic model used in peer effect literature is the following so-called linear and means model, where the output variable is achievement, our just control variable gender, and level of preparedness measured by admission scores, admission exams in Brazil University, and standardized test in high school of economics. And for peer variables, it's just peers admission scores for peer group as we defined it. So the base model applied to to our universities are the following. They are just depicted here. We added dummies for each year just to control for variation in grades across years. All variables that were used in our study are standardized. That means that all grades, all admission scores, or admission scores of peers were transferred to have a zero mean and the variance of 1. So it's standardized variable, so we can compare results for different years and for different universities. So for Unicamp, we were advised by our Brazilian colleagues to use the region of origin and gender as variables to predict social ties. As a region of origin, we have two sources. It's the city of origin and the state. So if student had 2 or 3 peers from the same city, we switch to region to state, because we consider 3 is too small population to choose friends from this sample. If a student had more than 3 peers from the same city, the region is the same city. As for high school of economics, our multiple studies of this subject as for determinants of friendship ties, these previous studies proved us that most reliable sources that predict friendship ties, easily observable, are study group and gender. They predict up to 40% of probability of creating a friendship ties across the cohort of students from the same year of admission. So for Unicamp students, we created 2 non-overlapping peer groups, students from the same region and the same gender, and same region and opposite gender. These groups not overlap, so we can measure effect from them separately in one regression equation. For Russian students, we created also 2 non-overlapping peer groups, same group, same gender, same group, opposite gender peers. And dummy variables for each program, because we have the same year of admission, so dummy variables for or fixed effect for years are not necessary here. Descriptive statistics, so standardized variables, they are 0, 1, and proportion of females for mechanical engineering 20%, 31% for economics, number of courses attended, so variation is not very big, but these are different courses, because there are some requirements to have some particular number of courses, of course. So the number of peers from the same region, same gender. So these 2 factors are most reliable predictors in our hypothesis. So the standard deviation is rather high. And admission test scores standardized number of students is students just as we have them. So one person, one item in this sample. High school economics, gender parity, number of peers from the same group and same gender, just half of group, approximately half of group. Females, half of group are males, and number of students at 5 programs. Next question.
Yes, sorry, maybe I've missed. Why don't you include region also in HSC sample? Or in it's much more important?
Actually, we did it.
But it wasn't significant.
Yes, they are not significant.
Okay, thank you.
It sometimes depends on how we define group. The matter also was the following: 40%, approximately 40% of HEC students are from Moscow and Moscow region. As for students from other regions, they are rather distributed across the country. So it's difficult to find peers from the same region for students not from Moscow and Moscow region. So we tried to divide sample into Moscow students and all others. This strategy was not very successful. Also, especially if we compare the effect of region origin and effect of study group and gender. Effect of study group on gender is much higher than potential effect of region as for friendship ties. Results. We estimated models for each program in Unicamp University. The models are the sample for all students, the sample, and separately for females and male students. So, female gender effect is not significant. As for mechanical engineering, our admission scores are just control variable. And what is of interest to us are peers variables that are shown here. For all students, it's significant. And as for size, approximately 20% of the effect from own test scores. This effect for the mixed sample is biased to this because males are disproportionately large in this sample, so the overall effect is achieved at cost of male students. So as a separated sample, so we see that peers are from the same region and same gender are significant. Opposite gender also significant, but the effect is 1/3 of the effect from peers with 2 coinciding factors. And comparing to own test scores effect, it's also about 20%. So we see the sample number is rather big in comparison to the number of students, just because we used multiple entries for each student, because the grades are different. So economics, gender disproportions are not so high for this program. Also, we have positive effects from peers who defined as coming from the same region and having the same gender, and a negative effect from peers who have only one coinciding factor, is just region. Opposite gender means negative effect. So if we predict, as we suppose, by 2 factors, so we have to take into account only these lines. Effect in comparison to own admission test scores is very high for females, and it's just about 60% of own effect, and here is about maybe about 30% of own effect. As for effect of females, just controlling for all others, just positive females have a greater grades, all other things equal. The same gender effect for Russian students, and we have in mixed sample positive effects from the same group, same gender students. This achieved because females demonstrate these effects. As for males, the effects from peers are insignificant, but females to have these results for mixed sample. So to sum up, we propose to define peer group in peer effect studies not through actual social networks data, not through exogenous larger group definitions such as study groups, or there are studies where all cohorts of students entering, for example, medical schools in the United States, the cohorts of several hundred students across all medical schools in the United States for many years were studied in one famous study. But to use predicted social ties. When this situation is possible, if we have observable factors that predict social types with high probability. It turned out that for Russian data, we can prove that these 2 factors are good predictors. Up to 40%, these 2 factors may explain the actual ties formation. This is useful when actual social ties are unavailable, or it's difficult to measure them. And of course, we have to see and to easily measure or easily obtain factors friendship. Both for Brazilian case and both for Russian case, these factors that we used are easily observed and measured. Using predicted ties instead of actual ties, we overcome a very serious problem of self-selection or endogeneity of social ties. The common critique of multiple studies, of many studies that just show correlation, just there are other factors, there's endogeneity problem, so we cannot believe to such data, to such results. Here we have heard this argument many times from our scientific advisor, John Nye, and of course he was right. And but he was right, but there are methods to overcome this problem, and one of methods to overcome this problem, to solve this issue, is the form just we described here. So we tested empirically the hypothesis, and we find positive peer effects in 2 different institutional environments when we used partly similar, partly different factors that predict social ties. Gender in both universities, and region of origin for Brasilia, and study group for Russia, because these factors for Russia, we know that this factor affects friendship, and we suppose that for Unicamp this factor of origin is also affects friendship. Size of effects, varies from institution to institution, and of course depends on the program specifics, as we've seen in mechanical engineering economics for Brasilia, and difference between Brazilian data and the results and Russian. But nevertheless, we have in both universities positive effects from predicted ties in mixed samples. How can we interpret the findings when we use predicted ties? There may be case if actual friends that matter for achievements, and then our results are underestimate the actual effect because predicted friends may contain actual friends, may not. Some are odds, some are not included, some friends. So the results are underestimated if the actual ties are those ties which matter for achievement. Or another explanation we can put forward is that not only connected peers affect students' achievement, but also students who have similar attributes, but not necessarily connected by friendship or any other ties. For example, females who study in the same group may take into account another female, not necessarily a friend, but just another girl in the room. But nevertheless, if a student observes behavior of another students of the same gender in the same study group, his achievement, his behavior or her behavior may affect my inspiration of particular students, his attitude to learning, or just kind of competition. If she can do it, why I cannot do the same things, for example. But to move or clarify the question on how different peers, predicted peers, not actual peers, or predicted peers and actual peers differ in their effect on achievement. Of course, we need data on actual ties, and maybe in future we will address this question in our studies. Of course, institutional environment of program, of university, of national education system influence student interactions, and people form relationships based on wide range of factors, not necessarily just two of them. They may be not observable. And nevertheless, principle of homophily is almost universal for any age, for any country. And of course, homophily puts limitations on information flows that go from one person to another person. And if not addressed properly, this may put limitations on achievements of students. For example, students from disadvantaged background, if connected one to another, they may find kind of closed clique and suffer from such limited social environment if they don't have enough connections and they have worse background than other students. And of course, reasonable education policy is able to ease this problem, for example, by manipulating composition of study groups, or for example, allocating roommates in dormitories just to diversify students' connections and to provide some kinds of meetings of students of different backgrounds. As for racial diverse nations, so interracial meetings or activities, sporting activities, etc. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any question to me or Maria Markovna, we may answer them right now. Dilar?
So can you please return to conclusions and results? Where you had a slide, yeah, findings.
Findings.
I don't really understand the third point. I mean, I don't understand the logic behind this statement, because as I understood from your paper that there are some sort of environment, it influences us, but the problem is that it's not random, and students select students select social environment that probably will influence them. And that's the problem of the selection, yes? And you say that we don't let these students to select these friends, and we'll select these friends for students. Don't you think that you just continue this selection problem, but you produce this selection by yourself as a researcher?
Mm-hmm.
And the second point is about homophily. So we know that homophily is like sometimes might be constructed in different manners. I mean, sometimes it works in a more complicated way. So it's important, for example, to be similar at a certain manner. But if we are too similar, that might create problems for our friendship, because we are so similar, so we start to hate each other. So and yeah, that's happened. And there are some papers on that, and probably that would be interesting to analyze. So it's difficult about gender somehow to measure this, but maybe you can measure different levels of homophily, paying attention to the region. I mean, not just whether we are from the same region, but also what is, for example, the distance from this region. I mean, if we are from different cities in one region, if we are from close cities, maybe it would be much more important for us. But if we are at the different parts of this same region, maybe it's something interesting also. I mean, maybe we won't influence each other or something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. As for the first question, the question is whether we substitute one problem by another problem. As far as I understand.
Yes.
Whether it resolves endogeneity problem or not. I think that we resolve the endogeneity problem because we have observable factors. And we use observable factors, exogenous ones. They are not endogenous factors. You have just city of origin, gender, and group, study group. They're exogenous factors. So any predictions made on the basis of exogenous factors are exogenous. So we don't have endogeneity problem here.
But okay, yeah, here I agree. But you select these factors. You say that gender and similarity of region and similarity.
Do you mean we endogenous in selecting the factors?
I mean, how you select these factors? Maybe there's something much more important. For example, in Unicamp, you told that they live in the same houses. Maybe this factor that like really much more important than, for example, being of the same gender or from the same region. So you select these, three factors, but like it's again like your own.
The question is why these factors are not another, not the other factors.
I understand that you don't have enough data, probably because of that. It's explainable, but still, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's like the question of why such kind of factors.
As for study group and gender, these findings are from other studies from our other, because they are not related to this particular sample. They are the influence of study group and gender. They are universal. We may put that students who study together, they have to form friendships, social ties with those who meet together most often in the classroom. But this is proved by the data, by your research also. It doesn't matter whether we invented it or we just tried it, but these are exogenous factors. Of course, if we find other factors that are exogenous and allow us to predict friendship with high accuracy, of course they may be used. And then we can test the hypothesis you just spoke out in your second question.
Can I just why we believe that the origin is important is that because for the case of Brazil, there is a lot of difference between regions. First, for example, food is different. Also, ethnic composition is different because people from other countries arrived centuries ago to different parts of Brazil. There are different, like, there are big diaspora of Japanese people at one state of Brazil, and also Jewish people in another state of Brazil, etc. So even appearance might be different from state to state. So there is much more supportive evidence that for Brazilian case it will be much more important than, for example, for Russian case. And also a lot of habits are and cultural traits are different for this, for this particular environment. That's why we believe that's important. Unfortunately, we don't have any data on their dorms, etc. But in Brazilian case, anyway, that's endogenous decision because you decide where you rent your apartment and with whom you do that voluntary. Because there is only a tiny part of dorms which are provided by the university, and also that's done on the social need basis, which means there is an obvious selection bias in terms of who gets this free dorms spaces.
Okay.
Unlike US.
Very small question. By the way, whether they have international students there in Brazil?
Yes.
A lot. I
An example?
Have you? Maybe you can also include homophily on country.
No.
Because probably people from Latin America come to Brazil because it's like more economically, like it's economically better country. I mean, no?
In the sample, students only from Brazil. As for international students, it seems that not so many students, not so many. Because
there are some.
Because Brazil is net exporter of students, not importer.
Not really?
Okay. Or just importer of student services, because a lot of Brazilian students study in the United States, for example. As continuing answering the first question of Dilara, if we can predict friendship but with multiple, many other factors of friendship, for example, with probability of 90%, if these factors are exogenous, the peer group is exogenous. If we completely predict friendship by exogenous factors, nevertheless we solve endogeneity problem, because we would manage to predict friendships by exogenous factors. So we resolve the problem that we don't have any other factors, all of them are observable, so we solved the greatest issue of all times. We can predict the behavior of people with 100 probability. So, but nevertheless, it's not possible, and if we would have many factors, we could test the hypothesis that Dilara, maybe some interactions between attributes, maybe some negative effects of coinciding gender and something else, and maybe not, who knows.
And why did you choose 5 particular departments of high school of economics? How did your choice help you to
just because the number of students and these programs, because it's the largest ones. Because Did we miss any large program here? Management, economics, international economics, law, business informatics. I think it's the largest one, just because we have many groups and diverse students with respect to admission tests. Because we have a larger range. If we have students at commercial places and public places funded by federal government. So the range of admission tests is greater at these programs.
Thank you for presentation. Could you show, please, the estimation results for mechanical engineering faculty? Could you show the results estimates for mechanical engineering?
Mechanical engineering.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I have a question about the reference group. Over here we have a lot of females and a lot of males and few females. And actually over here you claim that females influence females and are influenced by females, and males are influenced by males. But this situation looks a bit strange for me, because over here it looks like girls have very few friends, because according to your model, the friendship, one of the most important predictors for friendship formation is gender, and this means that girls on average have very 8 times less friends rather than boys, and I think that usually it is not correct, because even this is a mechanical engineering faculty, I think that the average number of friends between with boys and girls should be similar, because it depends not on gender. It depends on persons.
It's right, but we see for do you mean that females have to have friends who are partly females and partly they have to be males?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes,
I
think that maybe it's important to include some randomness, at least in such
and have a positive effect of opposite gender for females, having male friends, male potential friends, using the it's predicted friends, not actual, because we may just guess, is a positive factor. Having the same gender, same region, insignificant positive, but insignificant. And so?
Actually, I don't,
because
I feel that
maybe
really
just mechanical engineering is specific, just gender disproportion at the program, and specific of its technical, maybe some kind of problem or issue, that some programs more attractive for females, programs that are more attractive by males, maybe some kind of these issues. But we may explain that males fit this particular program better than females, just suppose it, and then having friends, potential friends, who are better fit into this particular program is a positive factor. And female, negative but insignificant, and positive, significant. Yes. As for females, insignificant. So there's no particular difference between females and males, but effect of females insignificant in comparison to economics and to high school of economics data.
Actually, I think that maybe it's nice to discuss this issue in terms of gender equality classrooms, but over here I'm not sure. As for me, I think that it sounds a bit strange that there are two totally different group sizes, reference group sizes, because if we have different groups of the same size and estimate how they influence us, it's I think that it's I don't know how to say it, but I think it's strange that we estimate this very big effect and very small effect and then compare them.
Big groups, potential friends, do you mean?
Yes, yes.
And the smaller ones. But we maybe could try to estimate the effect of size. Yes. Since that may be a good idea, so thank you. Yes, we have to put it to our memory. Effect of size.
Any more
Potential.
It's not, I think, a question. It's mostly a comment and continuing what just Sonia said before. I think that you have quite different results. For example, for two departments in Unicamp, and you have different influence of females and males in both countries, and the size of impact is really different. I mean that if we take Unicamp, you have that the impact of peers is comparable to admission test scores. It is just only twice lower than admission test scores, and in high school of economics you've had that it is quite small effect on these grades on test scores after the first course. So I think that there is some story above, more complete than just same region and same gender. And one of my ideas it is about the size of the region in the sample of each faculty. So I mean, you can outline that, for example, in economics you can have more students from one region, and in engineering from another region, and this could be correlated, for example, for some strong schools in the region. So, and that's why we can explain why we have different effects, I don't know, for males and females. And so one more story is the size of the region, and I don't know what kind of data do you have when you say that the origin of the student, where its birthplace, or just only the region. So if it could be, for example, students from Novosibirsk, that it is known for good quality of education, that came, for example, to Moscow, and if in particular program you have more students from this region, then you will have positive peer effect. So they could be with high probability get acquainted before they come, and then your method will give you good prediction about potential peers. And at the same time, it could explain why you have so different effects and different programs, and for different, for example, genders, because it is here you couldn't see whether these peers that from the same region in males and females, whether they're from the same regions or not. For example, maybe males from mostly males from one region and mostly females from the other regions. And then it is more regional effect than gender effect, for example.
Yes.
I don't know, you just
and then we have to observe actual friendship ties, just to estimate such kind of effects, because these are hypothetical networks. They are very crude picture.
Yeah, I see that it is a
just candidates for friends. Yeah.
How to make it more tiny, because you have.
And I think the best approach to answer this issue is to use actual data and to see whether such effects are present in the sample when we know actual ties, whether students actually pay attention to this factor or another factor. Or maybe we may answer some students. And we all used to be students. And among my friends were students from my own city and from other cities as well. So this factor was not very influential for me, for example. And for you? Yes or no? City of origin or region? Maybe Moscow, not Moscow.
I think it is
in the first month maybe yes, but later maybe not. I think yes, we have much more data, and this is a good idea to look at this issue separately. Yes, thank you.
It depends whether you are from big city, because if there are 20 persons in your cohort from Novosibirsk, it depends, rather than you are just 2 persons from Vologda. So it also matters the ratio of this. So if there are a lot of people from this city, or there are very few guys from this city, and but it's again...
I mean that 40% for high school of economics from Moscow region.
Yes.
And all are very diversely distributed all over the country. It is difficult to find at least 4 peers from the same city, particular program.
Maybe this is
maybe effect of dormitory may be more influential than effect of origin, because if you live in the same dormitory and you travel together, commuting from dormitory to classroom and back, and you interact not only in the classroom but travel together, live together, eat together, maybe cook together, maybe this effect. As for Moscow, maybe the effect of previously known students, previously known friends may be very effective here as for Moscow.
I think that also can you somehow include the strengths of the homophily, because I think that usually we say that yes, people who are similar with each other tend to be close, but actually we can see that people who are very similar on strange levels, for example, whether they're from the same, I don't know, music habits, they tend to be together. So maybe it's also important that whether people from the same small city is important, or whether these people, like girls from mechanical engineering, they're together, it's more important, rather than 2 boys are on mechanical engineering this program. So I think that maybe this homophily, it can be different for different groups.
Yes. Yes, of course, it should be different for different situations, because the gender disparity,
Yes.
it's a completely different situation from when you may observe half of group are males, half of group females, half of them are good students, half of them are middle, and no one is bad, and half of them like music, half of them like dancing, etc. If you have a lot of choice, then the situation is much more rich in potential choice than if you have only one girl that study mechanical engineering and you have no one to choose.
Yeah, we should approach our sociology department and ask
Yeah.
them how they form.
But Sophia is sociology, graduate from sociology, so we may ask your advice.
Any more questions or comments? So I think we should thank our speakers.